You ever wonder what really happens in the moments after your last breath? That mysterious instant when your mind leaves your body. Where do we go? What do we feel? Who greets us on the other side? For thousands of years, people have tried to answer these questions by creating religions, myths, and whole philosophies to unravel the greatest mystery of existence. Today, let's explore that final frontier together, basing our discussion on the studies of Edgar Cayce, the most documented seer of the 20th century, and on the thousands of near-death experiences shared from around the world. If you want to better understand that uncharted territory we all eventually cross, hit the like button now and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our content on spirituality, consciousness, and the mysteries of human existence. Imagine waking up in a completely unfamiliar place. You try to touch things, but your hand goes right through them like smoke. You try to talk to the people around you, but no one hears you. This is the first experience many souls have after leaving their physical bodies, a state of deep disorientation and confusion. James, a 67-year-old man who suffered a massive heart attack while mowing his lawn, described during a regression, "I was there watching the paramedics working on my body. I tried to say I was fine, that I was right there, but no one could hear me. I tried to touch my son's shoulder when he came in crying, but my hand just went right through him. It was the loneliest moment of my existence." Edgar Cayce describes this initial phase as a period of adjustment, where the soul has to get used to its new reality. It's like waking up in a foreign country without knowing the language or the local customs. Many souls remain in this confused state for varying amounts of time, depending on how spiritually prepared they were and the nature of their death. The most commonly reported physical sensation is a feeling of lightness, as if you finally shed a heavy diving suit you'd worn for decades. Your senses expand, allowing you to perceive beyond the five senses you had during physical life. Colors seem more vibrant, sounds clearer, and emotions more intense. The so-called veil of confusion is a recurring concept in Cayce's studies. It's like a kind of mental fog that keeps the recently departed soul from fully understanding its new condition. This veil serves a purpose, to protect the mind from the shock of such a dramatic transition. It's like waking up from a dream, but still holding onto the feeling of that dream. Describe Helena, a woman who had a near-death experience during complicated surgery. You know something fundamental has changed, but you can't completely process what it is. While some souls quickly recognize their change, others remain tied to emotional cords, energetic bonds that keep them connected to the physical world. These cords are made up of thoughts, emotions, and strong attachments that act like anchors, preventing the soul from moving on in its journey. According to Cayce's records, these bonds aren't necessarily negative. They're simply manifestations of the love and concerns we built up in life. A mother might stay close to her children. A husband might not want to leave his grieving partner. A businessman might worry about the fate of his company. Margaret, a 42-year-old woman who died in a car accident, shared during a mediumistic communication, "I couldn't leave knowing that my 16-year-old daughter was devastated. I stayed by her side for months, trying in some way to comfort her, until I realized that my presence, even as something she sensed but didn't fully understand, was only prolonging her mourning." Material attachments also have a strong influence. People overly attached to possessions, status, or professional identity often have a harder time letting go. A banker obsessed with his fortune might end up still checking his accounts and investments. A politician might try to keep influencing decisions. A celebrity might cling to the need to be recognized and admired. It's fascinating to see how different cultures intuitively understood this dynamic. The Egyptians buried their dead with belongings for the next life. Tibetans used the Bardo Thodol, Tibetan Book of the Dead, to guide the soul for 49 days after death. Mexicans celebrate the Day of the Dead, inviting their ancestors for annual visits. All these traditions recognize the same phenomenon. The transition is not instantaneous, but a gradual process of letting go and transformation. According to Cayce's studies, staying attached to these things can delay the soul's spiritual growth. However, there's no judgment here, just opportunities to learn and grow, each at its own pace and timing. The key understanding is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all spiritual timeline that every soul follows. Every journey is unique. After passing through the initial stage of disorientation and experiencing the effects of earthly attachments, the soul begins to realize that it exists in an in-between space, not fully in the physical world, but not completely merged with the higher spiritual realms either. Edgar Cayce called this state the intermediate realm, similar to what Tibetan Buddhists refer to as the bardo. In this space between worlds, consciousness undergoes a profound transformation. The veils that limited perception during physical life start to lift, allowing for extraordinary clarity. The soul embarks on a natural life review, not as some external judgment, but as a deeply personal reflection. It was like watching a 3D movie of my life, but I wasn't just a spectator. I felt everything all over again, and even more, I experienced the impact of every one of my actions on those around me. Recalled Thomas, a college professor who had a near-death experience during a near-drowning incident. A simple act of kindness I offered a student 30 years ago, which I had completely forgotten, rang out like a symphony of light. On the other hand, harsh words I once said to my brother in anger made me feel his pain with overwhelming intensity. This process doesn't follow a linear timeline. The soul might revisit particular moments over and over, not as punishment, but to extract every bit of learning possible from that experience. Events aren't judged by their magnitude or social recognition, but by their authenticity and their impact on the growth of love and compassion, both for oneself and for others. Time in this intermediate realm follows completely different rules from those we know on Earth. What seems like a brief moment can contain the complete review of decades, or a moment of deep understanding can subjectively expand over eras as the soul fully absorbs its meaning. Cayce stressed that this review isn't imposed by external entities. It arises naturally from the soul waking to its true nature. It's a process of self-recognition in which the divine essence within each being starts evaluating its own choices with a much broader understanding. In this intermediate realm, the soul doesn't just revisit memories. It finds itself immersed in true emotional landscapes created by its own consciousness. The environment around responds and molds itself to the inner states of the being, visually manifesting what was once only a feeling or thought. For those who cultivated love, gratitude, and compassion, these landscapes often take the form of lush gardens, fields of golden light, or serene beaches bathed in crystal clear waters. They aren't just metaphors. They're experiences as real and tangible as any physical scene, perhaps even more so. I found myself walking through an impossible garden, described Elena, a nurse who experienced clinical death during childbirth. Every flower seemed to hold entire galaxies. The colors were vibrant, pulsing, almost as if they were singing. I realized that each flower represented an act of love I practiced in life, from caring for terminal patients to the small daily gestures for my family. In contrast, inner states of anger, resentment, or guilt can show up as storms, barren deserts, or dark caves. It's important to note that, according to Cayce, these more challenging landscapes aren't punishments. They're opportunities for healing, external mirrors reflecting internal wounds that need to be acknowledged and transformed. A war veteran described his experience after a serious accident. I found myself in a devastated battlefield, facing violent storms of sand and fire. I realized it was my unresolved anger, my trauma, my hatred for those who had taken the lives of my comrades. It wasn't until I fully accepted these feelings, without judging them, that the storm began to calm. The beauty of this process is that the soul is never abandoned in these emotional landscapes. As it recognizes limiting patterns and old wounds, it also taps into internal resources for healing, wells of unconditional love, wisdom, and understanding that were always present, only obscured during earthly life. Forgiveness emerges as a powerful, transformative force in these landscapes. Not a superficial or forced forgiveness, but a deep acknowledgement of the fundamental unity of all life. When the soul manages to forgive itself, the landscapes start to bloom. When it extends that forgiveness to others, golden bridges appear, connecting islands of consciousness that were once isolated. Near-death experience reports very commonly describe encounters with beings of light, spiritual guides who appear to offer guidance during this transition phase. According to Cayce's studies, these guides aren't distant or abstract entities. They are often souls with whom we had significant connections in previous lives or even in our most recent incarnation. Grandparents, dear friends who passed on, spiritual mentors. Anyone can show up as a guide on this journey. Their appearance usually reflects the form the soul would most easily recognize, bringing comfort and a sense of familiarity in the midst of transformation. My grandmother was there, exactly as I remembered her from my childhood, but also radiating a light that went beyond anything I'd ever known, recalled Michael, an engineer who survived a cardiac arrest. She didn't speak with words, but communicated directly through thoughts and feelings. Her presence brought an absolute sense of security, as if I were finally coming home after a long journey. These guides don't act as judges or external saviors. Rather, they serve as cosmic therapists, helpers who assist the soul in navigating its own process of self-discovery. Respecting free will above all, they offer broader perspectives, reminding the soul of truths it had temporarily forgotten during its physical life. For those who have experienced traumatic deaths or violent endings, such guidance is especially important. War veterans report meetings with deceased comrades who help them process shared trauma. Accident victims receive help to understand the sudden transition. People who committed suicide often find not condemnation, but an unconditional love that gradually helps them reframe their experience and begin healing. The work of these guides is not about erasing the difficult experiences, but about helping the soul integrate them into a broader understanding of its journey. Like skilled therapists, they don't hand out ready-made answers. They ask questions that spark deep insights and catalyze transformation. He didn't tell me what to think about my choices, shared Anna, describing a guide she encountered after a near-death experience. Instead, he invited me to look at every situation from multiple perspectives, including those of the people I had hurt. There was no blame in his approach, just a gentle insistence that kept me from running away from the truths I needed to face. As the soul moves forward in its process of integration and healing, it starts to notice a luminous presence in the distance, a subtle yet persistent calling that many describe as the light. This phenomenon, consistently reported in near-death experiences across all cultures, represents an invitation to a deeper level of spiritual existence. It's fascinating to note that this light doesn't show up in the same way for every soul. Just as the emotional landscapes reflect one's individual consciousness, the call of the light takes forms that resonate with a person's own beliefs and experiences. For a devout Christian, it might appear as Christ. For a Buddhist, as the Buddha. For others, simply as a radiant presence of unconditional love that transcends any specific representation. It wasn't just light in the visual sense, said Sarah, an artist who survived a brain aneurysm. It was knowledge in the form of light, love in the form of light. It was as if all the meaning in the universe was concentrated in that glow. The most extraordinary part is that this light wasn't just in front of me. It was also inside me, calling me to recognize my true nature. Edgar Cayce explained in his studies that this call represents the moment when the soul is invited to completely transcend the earthly plane and its limitations. It isn't forced, but offered as a choice, one of the deepest exercises of free will that a soul can ever experience. And here lies one of the most intriguing paradoxes of the post-death journey. While some souls feel immediately drawn to this light, recognizing it as their true home, others experience hesitation. This phenomenon, what Cayce called shadowing, doesn't necessarily mean negative resistance. It often means that there are still experiences to complete and understand in the intermediate realm. A mother who passed away leaving behind young children might choose to postpone her complete transition in order to stay with them for a while. A doctor might feel the call to help other spirits in their transition process. A soul might sense that certain reconciliations still need to be made before moving on. These choices aren't judged as right or wrong. They're simply expressions of each being's unique journey. I saw the light and felt its irresistible call, shared Daniel, a professor who had a near-death experience during heart surgery. But I realized that my wife, who was distraught in the hospital, needed to feel my presence just one last time. It was like I was caught between two loves, the transcendent love of the light and the earthly love for my life partner. I chose to stay a bit longer, and I felt that this choice was perfectly understood and respected. According to Cayce's studies, the beauty of this moment lies in the fact that there is no cosmic rush. Time, as we know it, doesn't exist in this dimension. The soul has eternity for its journey, and every step is honored with its unique purpose and timing. One of the most profound discoveries a soul makes during its journey is the completely different nature of time in the spiritual dimension. The linear time, past, present, and future as an ordered sequence, is really just a construct of earthly experience necessary for learning in a physical body, but not an absolute truth. In the spiritual dimension, time is experienced more like a unified field where all moments coexist. This expanded perception lets the soul see not just its most recent life, but the broader pattern of its several incarnations, understanding recurring themes, lessons sought, and relationships that extend through different eras and contexts. It was like climbing to the top of a mountain and seeing the entire landscape at once, described Robert, an engineer who had a near-death experience during a climbing accident. I could see how events that seemed disconnected in my life formed a consistent pattern. I could see how people I briefly encountered left a deep impact on my journey. The most incredible part was realizing my connections with certain souls across multiple lives, friends, family, even rivals, all taking part in a cosmic dance of mutual learning. This broader perspective brings a transformative understanding about the purpose of relationships. Souls who loved deeply in life recognize each other as companions on a spiritual journey, not by chance, but by a profound recognition that transcends any particular incarnation. Cayce described these meetings as soul group reunions, constellations of beings evolving together, sometimes as parents and children, sometimes as lovers, and sometimes as teachers and students. In this context, love reveals itself as the most powerful force in the universe, not just a feeling, but the organizing principle of existence itself. It is love that builds bridges between dimensions, allowing souls separated by death to remain connected on subtle levels. Stories of communication between the living and the dead, widely documented across different cultures, can be explained by this transcendent nature of love. A mother who dreams of her deceased child and receives a comforting message she couldn't have known. A husband who feels the presence of his late wife in crucial moments. A child who naturally talks with an imaginary friend who turns out to be a grandfather who passed away before the child was born. These communications aren't illusions or mere psychological comforts. They are real expressions of connections maintained by love, transcending the boundaries between dimensions. As Cayce often stressed, love never fails, it never stops being. It is the eternal force, the force that moves, that builds, that saves. It is God. As the soul understands the illusory nature of linear time and the enduring presence of love, the gradual dissolution of attachments based on fear naturally occurs. Longing turns into gratitude. The feeling of separation gives way to the certainty of continuous connection. Loss is seen not as a definitive end, but as a transformation within an eternal relationship. There are countless accounts of souls who stayed close to the earthly realm until witnessing the emotional healing of their loved ones. Not because they couldn't move on, but as a compassionate choice to accompany those they love through their process of grieving. Maria, who lost her husband after 52 years of marriage, shared an extraordinary experience. A year after his death, I was in deep depression, unable to imagine life without him. One night, I had such a vivid dream about my husband that it felt more real than reality. He was radiant and told me, "Dear, I need you to set me free. Your suffering is keeping me here. I want you to fully live the years you have left, because time is short on earth, but our love is eternal." The next morning, something had changed inside of me. I started feeling gratitude for the years we shared instead of just pain from the loss. Months later, I dreamt of him again, but now he was even more luminous, as if he had advanced to a higher state. This is a perfect example of what Edgar Cayce described as mutual release, a process in which both the living and the dead allow each other to continue their evolutionary journeys. It isn't about forgetting, but about a higher form of love that honors the continuous growth of every soul involved. As we finish our exploration of the soul's journey after physical death, we come away with some essential insights that Edgar Cayce shared through his thousands of psychic records. Perhaps the deepest is the realization that death, as we understand it, is just an illusion, not an end, but a transformation, not a permanent separation, but a change in vibrational frequency. This view is extraordinarily hopeful. First, it confirms that consciousness continues beyond the physical body. Second, it reveals a universe that is fundamentally compassionate, where every soul receives exactly the experiences needed for its growth at the perfect pace for its unique evolution. There is no eternal punishment, only continuous opportunities for learning and expansion. No soul is ever abandoned, Cayce would say in his deep trances. No matter how lost you feel, no matter how dark your actions on earth might have been, the divine light remains at your center, patiently waiting to be recognized. This perspective has deep implications for how we live our lives here and now. If death isn't the end, but a transition, then our everyday choices take on a much broader meaning. Every act of kindness, every genuine expression of love, every moment of mindful presence becomes part of our eternal evolution. Knowing about the soul's journey after death also changes the way we deal with grief. The pain of separation is still very real. After all, we're used to experiencing life in physical bodies with limited perception, but it can be balanced with a deeper understanding. Those we love are never truly lost to us. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of Cayce's studies is his description of how souls eventually plan their return for new earthly experiences. Reincarnation, in his view, isn't a sentence or a punishment. It's a chosen opportunity to continue spiritual development through fresh perspectives and challenges. Before returning to a new body, Cayce explained, the soul actively participates in planning its next life, choosing circumstances, relationships, and even specific limitations that will serve as catalysts for its growth. This view suggests that even the most challenging difficulties we face may have been chosen by our own soul as opportunities for expansion. Contemporary researchers of consciousness, like Dr. Raymond Moody, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and many others, have documented thousands of near-death experiences that surprisingly confirm the insights Cayce offered decades ago. The consistency in these accounts, from people of different cultures, religions, and social backgrounds, suggests we are gradually developing a more scientific and universal understanding of what happens beyond the physical veil. It's important to emphasize that this understanding goes beyond specific religious dogmas, even though it finds parallels in every major spiritual tradition. The essence of the message, continuity of consciousness, continuous opportunities for growth, and the central role of love as the driving force of evolution, appears in Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and even in indigenous shamanic traditions. The practical wisdom we can take away from this knowledge is profound. Live consciously, understanding that every choice creates ripples that extend beyond this one life. Cultivate mindfulness, because it's in moments of expanded awareness that we connect most deeply with our spiritual nature. Practice forgiveness for yourself and others, not as a favor you give, but as an acknowledgement of every soul's evolutionary journey. Honor your relationships as sacred meetings between eternal beings temporarily wearing physical bodies. Develop gratitude for both the challenges and the happy moments, recognizing them as equally valuable teachers. Prepare consciously for your own transition, not with fear, but with the serenity that comes from understanding. If you're reading or watching this content while grieving someone you loved, I want to offer a gentle perspective. Your connection with that person continues on a level that goes beyond the physical. The vivid dreams, the meaningful coincidences, the inexplicable sense of presence aren't just psychological comforts. They are real expressions of a bond that physical death can never break. Before we wrap up, I'd like to invite you to share your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever had a significant dream about a loved one who passed away? Experienced coincidences that felt like messages from the other side? Or perhaps you've had a near-death experience you'd like to share? Our collective understanding expands when we bravely and openly share our stories. If this content resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Share it with someone who might be looking for comfort or a deeper understanding of the soul's journey. Together, we are expanding our collective consciousness about the mysteries of human existence. Always remember, death isn't the end of the story. It's just the turn of a page in an infinite book. As Edgar Cayce so beautifully put it, death is just a portal, a transition from one state of consciousness to another. Love is the bridge that keeps all souls eternally connected. Subscribe to the channel and like this video to get access to more stories like this. Until our next meeting, may you walk in peace and with the certainty that the journey continues, always expanding toward higher states of love, wisdom, and understanding.